Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to call the Howell Township Planning Board meeting to order. Eileen, would you read the opening statement, please?
Planning Board meeting Thursday, September 20th, 2018. I hereby declare this meeting of the Howell Township Planning Board to be open. Adequate notice having been given pursuant to the New Jersey Open Public Meeting Act in the following manner. First, on January 19, 2018, a copy of said notice was mailed to the Star-Ledger and the Tri-Town News. Second, on January 19, 2018, a copy of said notice was hand-delivered to the clerk of the Township of Howell. Third, on January 19, 2018, said notice was posted in the office of the Planning Board and on the bulletin board in the Howell Township Municipal Building, 4567, Route 9, Howell Township, New Jersey. In accordance with the Fire Prevention Code and your safety, please be advised that this facility is designed with 2 emergency exits, which are on your right at the front and rear of the meeting room. Furthermore, smoking is not permitted in the municipal building. Please take note that this meeting is being videotaped for possible future broadcast on Howell Township TV 77.
Thank you. Would you like to call the roll, please?
Yes. Mr. Boyle?
Here.
Mr. Husser?
Here.
Chief Kudrick was excused. Mr. Russo?
Here.
Mr. Schneider?
Here.
Mr. Tannenhouse?
Here.
Mr. Seaman was excused. Mr. Everett?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Nicastro was excused, and Mayor Berger was excused. Chairman Nash,
Present.
you have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, and then if you would, please remain standing for a moment of silence for all our responders.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, we have no minutes to approve. Correspondence. Before I go into the ordinances, Eileen, would you like to discuss any correspondence you have?
Please. The first letter I have is from Salvatore Alfieri. He's the attorney for Gill Petroleum, Inc. He said, as you know, I represent Gill, which is scheduled to be heard before the board on September 20th. I'm writing to request that the hearing be carried to the November 15th, 2018 agenda without the requirement of renoticing, and that the board take jurisdiction and announce the new public hearing date accordingly. He also granted the board an extension of time to act on the application through December 31st, 2018.
Okay, how is our November 15th calendar?
Right now, there's nothing on that date.
Okay, so I guess there would be no problem
No.
scheduling it.
The only problem could be that is the week of the league, and I did inform Mr. Alfieri. He said, let's take it for now, we'll go from there. So, it's at the end of the week, but,
Yeah,
so,
all right, well, all right, let's schedule it for now. Steve, could you please make the announcement?
Sure.
you need the, there you go.
Okay, I got it, it's on the, okay, if anybody's here for case number SP1006, Gill Petroleum, that application is being carried on notice to the board's regularly scheduled meeting of November 15, 2018, at 7 p.m. in this room. Again, Gill Petroleum is being carried November 15, 2018, 7 p.m. There'll be no further mailed or published notice of that application.
Thank you.
The next letter I have is from Jan Wooters. He is the attorney for SL Homes. When I had originally spoke to him about being carried from our last meeting to tonight, I told him he was going to be last. When he saw the agenda, he figures he's not getting heard, so he asked that this please be carried to October 4th, and he granted an extension of time to October 31st. And the October 4th agenda right now only has Pioneer at Howell. And in my conversations with Mr. Alfieri, they may also need to be carried from that date because they're revising their plans. So
they would be the only application.
at this point, they could be, yes.
Okay, so let's carry him to the October 4th meeting.
If anybody's here for case number SP-1013WM, which is SL Homes, Inc., that application is being carried on notice to the board's regularly scheduled meeting of October 4, 2018 at 7 p.m. There will be no further published or mailed notice of that application. Again, SL Homes is being carried to October 4, 2018.
And that's all the correspondence I have, with the exception of the 2 ordinances which we have to act on tonight.
Yes. Okay. First ordinance is ordinance O-18-31, an ordinance of the Township of Howell, amending Chapter 188, Article 3, Section 188-11, entitled Accessory Buildings of the Revised General Ordinance of the Township of Howell. So what we would be looking for is a motion that this ordinance is consistent with our master plan.
I'll make a motion that this is consistent with our master plan.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Roll call. Mr. Boyle?
Yes.
Mr. Husser?
Yes.
Mr. Russo?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Tannenhouse?
Yes.
Mr. Everett?
Yes.
And Chairman Nash?
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. Second ordinance is ordinance O-18-32, an ordinance of the Township of Howell, amending Chapter 188, Attachment 5, Land Use Application Checklist. Again, we'd be looking for a motion that this ordinance is consistent with our master plan. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion. Ordinance number 01832 is consistent with ours.
Thank you.
Second.
Mr. Boyle?
Yes.
Mr. Husser?
Yes.
Mr. Russo?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Tannenhouse?
Yes.
Mr. Everett?
Yes.
Chairman Nash?
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Excellent. All right, so we have no resolutions. We
No
have
resolutions.
no review of submission waivers, so we will go right to the first application, case number SD 2978, Edward and Laws McNamee. It's preliminary major subdivision, application of Edward and Laws McNamee as applicants and owners seeking preliminary major subdivision approval to subdivide existing 17.3 acre tract into 8 single-family residential lots utilizing the lot averaging subdivision development option available within an ARE2 zone district on premises known as Block 153, Lot 25 through 30, 334 West Farms Road. I am not going to read the history of this application.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, board members. My name is Lawrence Latrell. I represent Edward and Lourdes McNamee in connection with the above application. We have come back here before this board with a revised subdivision plan. The original plan was using a different portion of the alternative design, subdivision designs allowed under the ARE2 zone. There was some concern as to the traffic safety issues with those lots fronting all on West Farms Road. Specifically, the chief of police had opined that that it is a road that is frequently traversed by drivers at excess rates of speed, and there was some concern as to the safety of cars being able to come in and out of those driveways. So based on those comments and other concerns of the board members that we took into account, we proposed to go in with the alternative design. This was actually our original design. It was submitted to the board almost a year ago. I'm sorry, to the township almost a year ago. It never came before the board because there was an issue that arose with respect to one small variance that would be required. That specifically was under the lot averaging subdivision requirement. You have to dedicate 50% of the land towards open space dedication. We believe we comply with that. And the engineer is prepared to testify. However, in the interest of this board, and obviously we respect the opinions of the township engineers and the planner, we took the most conservative approach to the calculations, and therefore we noticed and requested on the variance. In fact, we presented that same issue before this board, and although it's not binding, it was essentially a straw poll where everybody agreed that that would be an okay condition. So we're now back before the board with this application. Our planner's prepared to testify as to why the 50% is not met. In fact, we are at 49 point, I'll let him get into the details on it, but it's 49.6%. And the main issue is there's a 66-foot right-of-way that is required by the township because West Farms is designated, I guess, as a collector road, basically a main road, which increases the right-of-way, which basically takes up more space. But it's not our space, it'll belong to the township, so the township's essentially getting their 50% of open space dedication one way or the other, in particular with this application. The other component is we do have available space on all the lots. They're not exactly 1 acre, some are a little over 1 acre. The open space under the ordinance can be a part of those lots. However, based on what the board's comments were in that last particular meeting, we thought it'd be best to just have a nice, concise lot averaging plan to be able to submit and then to be able to present to this board. Now, this is a preliminary subdivision request. We would have to come back before this board again in order to be granted a final. So before any subdivision map would be recorded, there are items that we would still have to comply with and come back before this board in order to deal with. So a lot of, basically all of the engineering issues that Ms. Newman had raised and requested as revisions to the map, we are stipulating that we will comply with those as a condition and before we come back before this board on any final subdivision map. So that alleviates those issues. And then the planning issues, which I'm summarizing again, of course, what we're about to submit to this board. We've met, the original plan did not have the widths designated on the lots. However, that has since been addressed with a updated plan submitted to the planner. The planner, of course, can corroborate that, of course, that we do, in fact, meet the minimum required lot widths for the lot averaging component. So without any further ado, I'm going to call back up our witness. He was sworn in and accepted as an expert on the last meeting. It's our engineer and planner, Mr. Walter J. Hopkins.
So I remember Mr. Hopkins was qualified as an expert in civil engineering. All right. Does anyone here recall if we qualified him as an expert in planning?
I believe we did, because we had some dialogue back and forth initially when this was heard specific to the lot width issue.
Okay.
So I do believe he was qualified as a planner as well.
If it's necessary, I could just read
No,
more to him on that issue.
I trust Ms. Newman. Her memory is a little better than mine.
Much better than mine as well, so, all right, thank you. So, he's already sworn in, but if we need to swear him in.
Mr. Hopkins, do you acknowledge that you've previously been sworn and that carries over to this evening's testimony?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Hopkins, have you had an opportunity to review the design plan that is submitted before this board?
I have.
And you in fact designed this?
Yes, I did.
Can you please talk about what has changed since the original design that was submitted?
So what's being proposed now is also 8 single-family homes. They are oriented along a cul-de-sac that is aligned with Richard Road. The 8 lots are just over an acre each in area, and they all conform to the bulk standards of your zoning ordinances. We also do propose, I believe it's in one of the professional's letters, and want to confirm that there is an 8.45 acre open space lot, which, do we want to mark the color rendered version of the exhibit that I'll be referring to?
The last that we had was, I believe, A12 that's on this list, so we
Yes.
marked that as A13.
Yes.
Can you please describe to us what A13
Sure,
represents?
A13 is a color rendered version of the subdivision and site plan that was submitted to the board. This plan in particular is...
Mr. Hopkins, can I ask a favor? Could you please move that closer to the dais, and we'll give you the wireless mic?
I can. I also have smaller ones that I could hand to the board, if that would help.
If we could do both, it would be,
Hold it.
So again, directing your attention to Exhibit A13.
Yes,
Can you please describe what that is?
There's an 8.5 acre, well, I think we described the exhibit, right? We have that.
Okay, there might have been an issue with the audio, that's why I asked.
So A13 is a color rendered version of the subdivision and site plan submitted to the board. This plan itself is dated September 20th, 2018.
And what specifically portion of well, this is seeking to do a 8-lot major subdivision in connection with the ARE2 zone, is that correct?
That's correct. And what I was about to refer to is the 8 lots are 1 acre in size, but they're surrounded by an 8.5 acre parcel that would be dedicated to the township. What that 8.5 acre parcel encompasses are all the wetlands and buffers that are on the site, as well as the perimeter buffer, a 100-foot buffer along West Farms Road, and the detention basin.
Now, you're familiar with the conventional subdivision requirements for the ARE2 zone, are you?
Yes.
And what are those requirements for a minimum lot? Is it 2 acres, minimum size?
Yes.
Okay. However, this is an alternative design that's offered under the ARE2 zone, is that not?
That's correct.
Specifically, the lot averaging alternative, correct?
That's correct.
And this application seeks to take advantage of the lot averaging component for a subdivision?
Yes.
Okay. And in connection with that, what are some, you're seeking to offer a portion of open space. Is that one of the requirements under the lot averaging alternative?
Yes, this alternative requires a 50% dedication. As Mr. Latrell indicated, we're slightly below that, only because there's a dedication that the township professionals have requested along West Farms Road to allow the township to widen the road at a future date. So
You say that the dedication, is that the right-of-way?
That is correct.
And that is a 66-foot right-of-way?
Total width of 66 feet, we would only be dedicating, of course, on our half.
Okay. So without that dedication, would this application meet the 50% dedication requirement?
Yes, it would. It would be 50.1%.
Okay. And currently, as it is now with the 66-foot right-of-way, it is how much, 49.6?
That is correct.
Now, there are no other variances required under this particular application?
There are no other variances. There's one identified in the board engineer's letter with regard to a driveway setback from a property line. That was an inadvertent driveway. We would correct that and would not seek that variance. And there is a de minimis exception from RSIS that's required with this as well.
Now, you said RSIS, you're referring to the residential site improvement standards
That's correct.
mandated by the state of New Jersey?
That's correct.
Okay. And in connection with this particular application, what is the right-of-way offered here, specifically the cul-de-sac?
So in order to maximize the amount of area that could be dedicated to the township under the open space, we proposed a 40-foot right-of-way, which complies with residential site improvement standards.
Is there a specific name for that portion of the residential site improvement standards?
The rural lane standard.
Okay.
And however, the rural lane standard does allow for a narrower pavement width. However, we felt it was better to give a 28-foot wide pavement width, which is what I think the board and most municipalities are used to seeing. So the exception is the space between the pavement and the right-of-way. So we could either keep it the way that it is and request the de minimis exception, or we could widen the right-of-way, meet RSIS, and then we would further reduce the amount of area that's being dedicated to the township for the open space.
Now, when you say it's further reduce it's still, that right-of-way is dedicated to the township, correct?
That's correct.
So ultimately, it would be the township still getting the space, it's just it would be more in the right-of-way, a little less on the open space dedication.
That's absolutely correct.
And the trade-off would be for the ability to for additional utilities if they one day became available, or sidewalks or anything of that nature?
That's correct.
Now, there's no sidewalks offered in connection with this rural lane, correct?
That's correct.
And is there a reason for that?
To reduce the amount of impervious area and also the fact that we do have such a narrow width between we felt it was better to have the wider pavement.
And are there any sidewalks on the West Farms Road
No.
on this property? All right. So there would be sidewalks going, but they'd be going to essentially nowhere, correct? If they were put in. Now, in connection with this application, did you anticipate in the future that if there was a necessity for utilities that, with the 40-foot right-of-way, that you did offer something else?
What we do have is a utility easement, which goes onto the individual property owners, which would allow the municipality or any utility companies to install utilities in that area.
Now, the current public utilities that would be available for this property are what?
Gas, electric, telephone, cable.
So, and those, if, again, this is only a preliminary subdivision application, but those are proposed to be buried, are they not?
Correct.
Okay. In this application?
Yes, underground.
And specifically, if the applicant or the board were to request a 50-foot right-of-way in lieu of the 40-foot right-of-way, then that would just eliminate the need to offer the easement for the utilities. Is that your understanding?
That's correct.
Okay. So just for the purposes of clarification, we are willing to submit if the town engineer prefers the 50-foot right-of-way, or the board members prefer the 50-foot right-of-way. We are prepared to offer it. We did notice for the variance at the 49.6. However, we did add a contingency in the notice that we would ask for any other variances that may be required or demanded at the time of the application. So we leave that to the discretion of the board and its engineer, but we are fine with it either way.
Laura, would you like to weigh in on that, please?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, I would prefer that we go with the 50-foot right-of-way. It is a de minimis in the portion of the open space dedication, but I would prefer to have that by way of right-of-way and not easement.
We are prepared to offer that in lieu of the easement, and we would revise the plans accordingly, obviously subject to the approval.
Nick? Yes, no?
Yes.
Brian?
I defer to Ms. Newman's recommendation.
Same.
I mean, essentially, it's not just so it doesn't really change the plans, it's
Right.
just what's
I'm just-
depicted, yeah.
I want to do it as a matter of record while we have it. Paul?
Yeah, I concur with that.
Everett?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Okay, so you will give us the 50-foot right-of-way.
Yes, and we would withdraw then the offer of the proposal of the utility easements on either side, since there's now sufficient space. So, Mr. Hopkin, in connection with this application, there's an offer of an open space dedication, correct?
That's correct.
And do you believe that, obviously, that this is an application that promotes open space in connection with municipal land use purposes?
Certainly, because almost half of the property is going to be preserved.
Now, in a conventional subdivision, there would be 8 lots, correct?
That's correct?
Those 8 lots would be 2 acres each, correct?
Correct.
Minimum of at least 2 acres, correct? And that was depicted on the yield plan submitted with this application, correct?
Correct?
Now, if a conventional subdivision was submitted, is there anything stopping the property owners of those 8 lots from clearing those 8 lots, or the trees or whatnot that's on it after they acquire ownership?
Not on its face.
Okay. But this application, however, would preserve 8.5 acres approximately of land that would be dedicated as open space in perpetuity, correct?
That's correct?
In perpetuity, I'm sorry.
That's what you're calling Lot 25.01, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and with respect to the original application, you did, or your most recent revision, you did see the review letter from the planner, Mr. Peter Vanderkoy, correct?
Yes.
And there was some concerns that Mr. Vanderkoy had, specifically that the lot widths of the latest plan were not depicted on the plan. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And have you since submitted a plan to Mr. Vanderkoy to review that did depict the lot widths?
Yes.
And those lot widths are compliant with
Yes,
the lot
yes, they are.
averaging?
Yep.
They're at least 100 foot of width specifically?
That's correct.
And they're measured at the midpoint of each of those lots, is that
Yes.
the understanding? And did you hear back from Mr. Vanderkoy in that regard as to if that was sufficient?
We'll let him testify on himself, but I do believe that he concurred.
I would just ask Mr. Vanderkoy to confirm that issue.
I agree, all lot widths were compliant, or are compliant.
Thank you. Now, in regards to the current application, aside from the open space preservation, in addition to that, you recall the prior application, which had 8 lots fronting on West Farms Road, correct?
Yes, I do.
And do you recall, prior to this, there was, under a prior owner, there was a 5-lot subdivision that was granted, which all fronted on West Farms Road, correct?
Yes.
That was never recorded, never went through. However, you recall what the testimony of, or the comments were from the chief of police at the last meeting as to the safety of or concerns he had, safety concerns of lots fronting on West Farms Road.
I do recall.
And do you feel, or do you have an opinion as to whether or not this revised proposal, specifically with the offer of a cul-de-sac and using the lot averaging component, is a safer design than the lots fronting on West Farms Road?
I'd prefer to say that we've addressed his concerns directly. He wanted a cul-de-sac, and I think board members did, off of West Farms Road. They wanted it aligned with Richard Road, and that's what we've provided.
And this provides, obviously, it's in line with Richard Road, correct?
Yes.
And that is in your understanding, a better planning alternative?
Yes, it is, and it's required under RSIS.
Okay. Now, with respect to the, between the two applications, which one would promote the free flow of traffic? This one or the prior one? Do you have an opinion on that?
I think they both do. I think I testified in the last application that those driveways were safe because the area was used to driveways fronting on it. Certainly, if 8 driveways on a road were safe, one cul-de-sac would be as safe.
Or if not safer, correct? Is there
Correct.
one exit and entry point into the development as opposed to 8, correct?
Counselor, at the last meeting, we had asked that you bring a traffic engineer back in to discuss this issue.
The issue was, the issue of the traffic engineer was the meeting prior to that. And what we had done, which would alleviated that issue, is we agreed to come back with this particular application as opposed to the 5 lots. If we were going to move forward with the 8 lots fronting on West Farms Road, the understanding was we needed to have some traffic expert testimony. Now, our engineer is he's qualified to testify in that regard, but ultimately that concern has been alleviated since we're going to the design that the board had preferred.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I do specifically remember asking the chief at that meeting that if we aligned these, if he wanted a traffic expert at the last meeting, and I specifically remember him saying that if they were aligned, that no further traffic study would be required.
So the chief also discussed an issue with the sight distance as you crest the curve going in the eastbound, I'm sorry.
I do recall the issue.
It's the
I
eastbound
do recall
direction.
the issue.
All right. You want to put some testimony on that?
What I can tell you is that, as was posed to me at that meeting, if we had studied the road, we hadn't, because it required additional surveys up to that area. And I do, again, specifically remember asking the chief, if we aligned these, did he need us to go back out there and survey it and provide that exhibit?
I'm asking you the question now.
Okay, well,
all right?
I'll tell you that I have not studied that, because at the last meeting, I was told not to. As long as we did this, it wasn't necessary.
That was my understanding as well. That's one of the main reasons that we came back with the revised application.
Otherwise I would have.
In addition, this is a preliminary subdivision application. We have to come back before this board, before any map would be created or any lots are created on a final subdivision application.
Let me just ask my professionals.
Yeah, so just to kind of echo and follow up, I have the same recollection as it related to the traffic study. However, I don't know that that alleviated a sight distance concern. So I think if the board were to act favorably, we're going to want to know that there's no issue because there's a specific crest in the road that was brought up. I would agree that the alignment of the roadways probably poses safe, but without the grading information, we just want to ensure that there's clear sight distance.
Which also brings me to the question of, I know the chief was concerned about the speed of the vehicles, and I'm telling you now, with the sight distance issue, does this warrant the development of small left turn pockets so that a car stopped waiting for to make a left turn doesn't get rear-ended as a car comes over that crest?
Well, I'm certainly not prepared to answer that on the fly. My knee-jerk reaction would be that this is an insignificant traffic generator for 8 lots, but I would, if that's something that the board would like us to look at, we will.
There's already a road there. Richard Road is already there, correct?
Yes, it is.
Presumably cars turn, all left turns and right turns off of West Farms Road onto Richard Road, correct?
Correct.
So whether,
Yeah, but you're creating a new roadway on the down, that's a left turn on the downside of a crest curve, all right? And that's the issue, not the existing intersection. It's because you're putting the new street in. So what I'm going to ask you is, if we do act favorably on the preliminary, all right, that you come back ready to address this when you come back. for
absolutely,
final.
yeah, before the final, yes, again, all the engineering concerns that would be requested by the engineer, including that issue, we would have to comply with. There's requirements, there's a whole host of requirements that we have to go back and comply with before the major subdivision. But yes, we would definitely deal with that issue to address any issues that are concerns that the board would have.
Okay.
Just on one other particular question with respect to this application, you have where the entrance is into the cul-de-sac, there's some clearances, which appears to be is that in preparation for a site triangle easement if offered?
Yes, we've shown a site distance and a site triangle easement in accordance with your requirements. I think what the chief and the chairman's concern is more not in horizontal alignment, but in vertical. So we have addressed the horizontal alignment, and we'll clear the trees to make sure that that's clear. But when we come back for final, we would address the vertical alignment as well.
Now, there was also some concerns, even though we indicated before that we would address the concerns of the engineer with respect to the trees, but specifically with, although we're preserving a 100-foot preservation along West Farms Road, which is, by the way, that's required, one of the requirements under this lot averaging subdivision, correct?
That's correct, and we comply.
But in addition to that, since some of there were some concerns that the engineer had as to the type of trees that are within there, we're prepared to go ahead and offer additional trees if the engineer would want those trees cleared out, and additional trees that are either a more native species or something that would promote the concerns of the engineer. So we're prepared to do that. Again, it's in her letter.
Yeah, I had made comments, because I went out a while ago with engineer to, see what was on the site. Of course, at that point, it was just the subdivision along the road. There are a good amount of, invasive species out there and trees along West Farms Road that are not in good condition due to the power lines and pruning the trees. So I was kind of concerned just with keeping some of them along West Farms Road just because they're in such bad condition. So I would like to at least take a look at that.
Do you have a copy of Ms. Newman's September 20th letter?
I have a copy of, yes, I do.
Okay, so your representation is that you will comply with all aspects of this letter?
Yes, and I think specifically another site visit is warranted, and that's
Right.
what they're looking for.
Yeah, because we also didn't look as far back into the site either, because there was no need to before.
And again, that's only a preliminary. We would certainly, obviously, agree to do all those things because we have to come back before this board and be able to state that, yes, we've done these things, and obviously the engineers and the professionals are here to confirm whether or not it's taken place.
Okay. Very good.
Now, with respect to this, with this application, in addition to the open space conservation, and in addition to the transportation, specifically free flow of traffic vis-à-vis where development straight off of West Farms Road versus the application that's here, this is in fact an alternative development design, is it not?
Yes.
Okay, so a conventional, you indicated before, the conventional subdivision design would be 2-acre development. This is the lot averaging design is something offered by the township in its ordinance, which we are utilizing, correct?
That's correct.
And do you believe that that satisfies the purposes of the municipal land use order, specifically under NJSA 40:55D-2P?
Yes, I think we've hit on a few of those, open space and safe and effective transportation routes and alternative designs as well.
So the open space specifically is referenced under subsection G, subsection J, obviously the lot averaging under subsection P, and then the encouragement of the free flow of traffic under subsection H. Those are your testimony as a planner that those are the advances the purposes under municipal land use law?
That's correct, that's my opinion.
And do you have is your opinion that the advantages or the purposes that are being advanced under the municipal land use law outweigh any detriment that may be caused by if the variance is granted?
In fact, I believe we meet the spirit and intent of your ordinance because the township is getting the land one way or the other. They're getting it either in open space or they're getting it in right-of-way. And certainly the benefits of granting this variance far outweigh the detriments. We heard from the board, we heard the preference, we've heard about the traffic concerns, and we've addressed them all with this proposal.
And you're familiar with the master plan of Howell Township, at least reviewed in connection with this application, correct?
Yes, I believe that these can be granted without substantial detriment to the township's master plan, zone ordinance, and certainly the neighborhood.
I have no further questions at this time, other than on the exhibits that we have here on the exhibit list, the most recent revisions are depicted as A11. I just wanted to confirm that that's the last revised on 8/31/18.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Your last revision on the plans, not
Yes.
including, it's
August
8/18, okay. I have no further questions, I just reserve the right to call it back. I'll defer to the board now.
I would like, if you could, Ms. Newman's September 14th letter on page number 3, going on to page number 4, 5A through E, if we could address those, please.
Sure. Sure. I don't know if we actually said, but 5A, we would certainly deed restrict the open space lot. Actually, it doesn't make sense. The open space will be dedicated to the town.
That's because it's not about the open space, it's dealing with the lots created,
Okay.
which I don't think any of these become oversized based upon the switchover in this subdivision, but they wouldn't be able to be further subdivided.
And we can deed restrict that if that's what makes the.
That's
board-
correct, actually, that's a requirement under the lot averaging ordinance, and we would add deed restrictions in here that this property can no longer be further subdivided. That is a condition that we are prepared to meet.
And there currently do exist, I think it's 3 streetlights along West Farms Road. One of them will conflict with the proposed entrance, and we're going to relocate that. It actually turns out to be a convenient location because then we'll have the entrance to the new development lit with an existing streetlight. Your 50-foot buffer is proposed. She's requesting that we monument it, and we certainly would comply with that in accordance with your ordinance. And the D has to do with well setback. I'm not sure that there is a requirement for setback, but we certainly would comply with the Board of Health's requirements as far as setbacks from the property line. As far as any need for any improvements along West Farms Road, I certainly think that what's there now, there really isn't a significant amount of improvements or sidewalk along West Farms Road. and we're simply proposing to tie into the existing pavement with there'll be Belgian block curb on our property, and then it would be tapered out to the radii on West Farms Road.
And you'll comply with all the items
all
listed in
6.
6 and 7.
That's correct.
Any board members have any questions?
We discussed last time about the use of the property for historic agricultural, and that there would be an investigation to see if there was any historic applied pesticide residues on the property. Has that been done as of yet?
So I could talk to that. We did retain Envirotactics, which did the wetlands delineation on this property. They have not completed their testing yet. However, again, because this is a preliminary subdivision and the ordinance itself specifically references that prior to any development, specifically the ordinance references section 188-26.1, says prior to any development, the soil samples have to be submitted to confirm that there's been no pesticide contamination from any prior agricultural use. So we are prepared, and I did email Ron Kachari. I also spoke with the township attorney before and confirmed with the engineer that we are prepared to do that if the board acts favorably on this preliminary subdivision application, to do that as a condition prior to coming back before any final subdivision is granted. And specifically, the Environmental Commission did review it. There was not any comments that they did, but again, I'm representing here to this board because we've represented before. We did retain Envirotactics to do it because at some point we would have to do it anyway.
Is there any repercussions if we grant preliminary on this and they go and find impacts on this property?
So I think the answer is no, unless it would impact the developability. I mean, if the site turns up where it has areas of concerns, they'd be obligated under the state to remediate that to DEP standards under the
Correct.
LSRP
If there's
program.
contamination, so there's 10 samples that are required under the boroughs, the townships. I do a lot of work for Red Bank, so I'm used to saying borough, but the township's requirement for the samples. It, in fact, mirrors the requirements under the DEP. It's requiring those things prior to any development where the DEP has a higher a bigger threshold of when that would trigger. But ultimately, regardless of who's requiring or requesting it, once that engineer tests that soil, and if there's a confirmation that there is pesticides, then they're required to notify the DEP, and then we're required to go ahead and remediate. The issue with this particular property, at least from the historical, you did have an opportunity to review the historical photos of this property?
That wasn't part of our scope, but I do understand that there is concern with this.
There's a chicken coop. We found remnants of a foundation, which are apparently a chicken coop that are on the property that are proposed to be removed as part of this. So it does fall into the issue. We believe that within the spirit, at least on the most conservative component, that we're going to have to get that requirement anyway as a prior to any development. And we're prepared to obviously offer that. And, the professionals seem to be okay with, obviously, make sure we do that before we would ever come back before a final.
Is there any need, I just want the board's opinion, is there any need to deed restrict or write anything in the deeds to let the homeowners know about the 50-foot buffers and the preserved land and so forth, so that they clearly understand that the extra land they see in their backyard is really not theirs?
We are prepared to offer that, or what I can say is
I'm just asking, I was just an
Sure.
opinion, so just...
Okay.
If I could chime in, what I would recommend, I think Mr. Tenenhouse has an excellent point, because people tend to think they just go all the way back, even if it's disclosed. So what I would recommend, subject to our attorney's consent, is if you file the resolution, usually with the county, it shows up if you're doing any deed research for the property. And I find that to be a helpful mechanism so that, if needed, we could show that that was in fact the findings of the board and that that area isn't to be disturbed.
But I agree with Mr. Tannenhouse, is that that's all fine and wonderful, but how do we prevent a homeowner who clearly may not understand it, who just decides that I just want to clear the rest of my lot?
Well, that's code enforcement. That's a code enforcement issue. I mean, that's not their property, honestly, so if they overcleared, it's not their property, it becomes a code enforcement issue, and would have to be restored if someone
I
in
think
fact
they're
did
putting
that.
monuments in as well, right?
We are putting, yes, correct. The application proposes to put the monuments, in fact, that's a recommendation
Are
of
you
the
thinking
engineer
about a
on
fence
it.
of some sort?
The,
I think,
Yeah, that's what I was
Delineate,
thinking.
to
yeah.
delineate?
well, I don't know about the fence, ultimately, because one of the issues that that we're trying to promote is the open space and obviously the look of it and then the free flow of, obviously, Mr.
Yeah, but the fence will prevent
The line?
these lots from being disturbed, the open space from being disturbed. I don't see why fencing would not be appropriate. It can be a rustic style
It-
fence, but I think that that's going to alleviate the problem.
The issue is, respectfully, the issue here with this particular property is all wooded. So for us to go ahead and put a fence in would require us to clear the wooded area that we're seeking to preserve. So ultimately, it runs against the purposes of what we're trying to do is with respect to the open space. What I will say is this, we are prepared to put into the deeds the reference that there is open space requirements and easements and conditions which must be complied with, specifically referring to the map. So in any title search that would go through, if a final subdivision is granted, the map is recorded. The map has all of the restrictions and provisions referenced in there.
But
Those
that doesn't
are
stop an individual that decides they want to put a swimming pool in their backyard. How do you prevent it? I mean, after a fact, it's going to be done.
So no swimming pool could be installed without a permit. When you submit it, the permit application, and any homeowner is going to be required to submit a survey and something depicting where the location of that would be, before the zoning officer or the code can sign off on it. Once that is done, and they see that, wait a second, you're putting a swimming pool into the property, frankly, they don't own, the approval would never be granted, assuming that
I'm gonna,
Just for the board.
hold on one sec. Laura, I'm gonna do something that you really love. I'm gonna put you on the spot right now.
All right.
Right? Because I have this also. Is there some type of flexible type of fence, and I'm not talking about a snow fence, but something a little more substantial, that would give some sense of this is the end of your property without having to go in and do any type of substantial work within the restricted area?
Well, given the size of it, I don't know how they would be able to get the machinery in and stuff to install. I mean, this is a pretty big area to go in without, destructing some of
we
the
wouldn't even be
trees.
able to can't guarantee we could draw a straight line
I
because of
understand
the wooded.
Can I chime in also?
Sure, absolutely.
I often am on residential sites, for tree removal permits where people don't have any idea what they purchased. They have no clue they got easements on their property. I'm always explaining it to them. But where the easements come in, it's very far from their home. I would say this would be more of a problem if the line is much closer to, where the tree line ends. Being it's so far back, I don't think it's as much of a worry, just because with the expense of tree removal and then expense of maintaining all that property, that once it's cleared, I could see them going this 20, 30 feet over, but this is way beyond, that. And the only thing, once you put fences back there, and even if you did something like a mesh fence, the deer will ruin it, and then they're gonna be calling and saying, my fence came down, who's gonna fix that? So then we might create more problems, so. But I do think since you have so much land behind where it's already cleared, they should be all right.
And one of the other conditions before we would ever come back on the final subdivision, the engineers for the township are going to have an opine as to the location of the monuments in order to best depict to any property owner or anybody where their property starts and where theirs ends. So I would defer to them. We're prepared to offer and comply.
Could I offer a
With that?
potential alternative solution? I was on vacation in Maryland this summer, and the campground that we were at, they had wetlands around the campground. And part of Maryland's requirement was when them put a metal stake in the ground with a tiny little sign that explained to them, this is wetlands, don't enter. So I don't know if there's a happy medium, to maybe just put a couple of signs, maybe one right in the middle of the person's property
Yeah.
width, that just lets them know this is the farmland buffer, and that they need to stay out of it.
That's the monuments.
Yeah.
Well, I think Mr. Tannenhouse is talking about a raised sign with the, because quite frankly, people aren't going to understand a monument, all right?
Right.
I think a sign
Makes
with a
sense.
post.
Well, I think Peter has a suggestion.
Yeah, building off of what Mr. Tannenhouse said, U.S. Fish and Wildlife at Forsyth and some other places, they have what's essentially a 3-inch wide or so plastic. It's like a hard plastic that's about a 1/4 inch thick, and it functions so almost like a post, but since it's plastic, it's all weather, and it has a label at the top, and it can say whatever you'd like. But in this case,
That,
there-
if it's
Fine.
in addition.
Okay. Thank you.
I wish we could do that in lieu of the monuments, frankly, because the monuments are
No.
very expensive. But thank you, though. That's a great suggestion.
So what's up? Oh, Brian, done?
No, I'm done. Well, since this is preliminary, this is gonna go back to Fire Bureau review, because
Correct.
their review was for a different application. And
Correct. One of the
They have
things that the Fire Bureau did do, I apologize for interrupting, they indicated, similar to they did on the prior one, that if they don't support the RSIS standards, and that the proposed roadway widths in the cul-de-sac radius are inadequate for the fishing use place, we're agreeing to increase the right-of-way width to 50 in connection with this application. Again, we still have to go back and seek any other approvals that may be required, specifically from that commission, and obviously with the recommendations of the engineer. So we are prepared to offer that. We are offering Mr. Hopkin, where the current road width, pavement width is offered is 28 feet, correct?
That's correct?
And that allows for parking on the street, at least on one particular side?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Any more, Brian?
Good, thank you.
Mr. Russo? No, I'm satisfied. You guys, you good? So, I'd like to talk about the drainage basin for a minute, okay? The last major storm where our neighboring township had 8 inches of rain, got inundated. Well, over in the Ramtown section, we had situations where the basins overflowed, and as they are supposed to, they topped the basin, and in this particular case, it spilled out into the back of an adjoining residential development, all right? The way you have it set up here right now is that one particular lot. I'm assuming that when it tops, it will spill out into the open space behind it to the north of it, correct?
That's correct.
All right. What's to the north of that open space parcel?
There is, and whoever's got control of it, I don't think it's see it. There is a residence that is off-site. There it starts to come into view there. Approximately 250 feet away.
I'm sorry, how much?
250 feet?
250 feet.
And between it, there's an intervening wetland area as well.
Okay. And this is a topic I just want to palm my board on. We had this discussion a little bit already about the issue of sidewalks, and I think it's something that we're struggling with, what to do with the sidewalks. Now, in my personal opinion, sidewalks clearly aren't warranted on West Farms Road, but what's the board's opinion about sidewalk within the development itself?
I like them.
I feel for the safety of the children that are going to be living there and riding their tricycles on a sidewalk rather than a street because of some delivery truck coming in or a utility truck or a visiting relative and zips down through there, even though it is a short street. For the safety of the children that'll be out playing, I feel there should be sidewalks there.
I agree. Council, there are no sidewalks proposed in this application, correct?
There were not, and the
Inside.
reason we didn't, because they weren't leading to, and there were none on West
I'm
Farms
saying
Road.
inside the cul-de-sac, there's nothing?
That's correct. If the board were to approve it conditioned upon the placing of sidewalks, I'm
I totally understand,
inclined to do it, it's just,
I totally understand no sidewalks on West Farms Road. I totally get that, and I'm actually, our board is kind of split on the issue of sidewalks on major highways, 33, we discussed this, Route 9.
Right.
I'm of the position that, you know, a sidewalk leading to nowhere only invites danger. If a little kid goes on a sidewalk and they walk down the street and the sidewalk ends, they could find themselves in danger. However, in this cul-de-sac, I think you need it. That's just my, yeah.
we could, if based on what the board's concerns are, we could offer to put these sidewalks in and then have them terminate right where the 100-foot buffer ends to address both the concerns, the concern that the children have a safe spot and that there'll still be at least 100 feet away before West Farms Road where the sidewalk ends.
That would be
I-
fantastic.
I think that's the board consensus.
Okay. We'd be prepared to do that as a condition of the approval.
I just want the board to understand that it's not going to go all the way out to West Farms Road. What was
Right.
offered was terminating at the start of that 100-foot buffer.
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed.
One more thing about the drainage basin, because that's a hot-button issue right now in town. As the chairman previously mentioned, we had a pretty big problem in Ramtown. Part of the problem was due to the piping. The pipe apparently in the basin, it was a smaller pipe, and I'm not an expert at this stuff, I'm still learning, but it was a smaller pipe that went into a bigger pipe and a smaller pipe. I want to make sure that the piping is adequate to support, I was told it was a 500-year storm, but I frankly don't care.
So what I can tell you is while that sounds great, that's not what's required. So piping is designed for a 25-year storm. Basins are designed for the 100-year storm.
Right.
So that's really all we can ask for. We don't have any condition here where we're causing bottlenecks in pipes, so where a 15 might go to a 12 or an 18 may go to a 15. That we don't have here. So the piping, as you continue along the system, either gets larger or maintains that same size. But unfortunately, the piping system is designed for a 25-year storm event.
One of the things that we were proposing with particular this application, and again, it's not proposed before the board because it's a preliminary, but is the requirement of the maintenance of the basin this particular property is going to be offered and have a homeowners association. Part of that homeowners association is going to require maintenance of the trees because the idea behind it is we have a huge portion of property that no particular homeowner owns, yet it's going to affect the visibility and, of the property itself, specifically the aesthetics. So the best way we thought to address those concerns, and obviously especially with the maintenance of the basin, is to actually create a homeowners association. That homeowners association would then be responsible for the maintenance of the basin, and so as to not place that burden on the township itself with the other
So,
reasons that we
Mr. Chairman, the one thing I would say on this is, since the applicant's here for preliminary, I would recommend that we have the opportunity to at least review this with either Public Works or the Community Development Director of the township, only because I have found typically 8-lot subdivisions can't support a homeowners association. And so what you end up happening is, within a couple of years, you have angry homeowners that are looking to the township to then take it over. So I just think it's something we should explore to make sure that the town may support it. We've supported homeowners associations on other parcels. I'm just not sure that 8 lots is enough to substantiate it.
And again, that's why I didn't bring it up but for the concerns of the board, because it was only a preliminary, and that's,
How deep is this basin?
5 feet.
Well, you have fencing around the basin?
We have fencing that ties into the wood line. We could
Around the
create
whole
wood-
basin?
Just to the wood line. It doesn't go all the way around the basin, but that's something that we could add if the board were so.
Well, if it's 5 feet, you could get a kid to drown in it.
Well, they're adding the fencing all the way around.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah, we would offer that.
you just did.
Okay.
Does the board have any other questions? All right, I'd just like to open up the...
Sure. Thank you.
The meeting to the questions to this witness. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to come up and ask questions of Mr. Hopkins, Please come, step forward to the podium to be sworn and put your name on the record. Actually, I think you're going to get feedback on that
Yeah.
because there's a mic right there.
My name is Jeff Hodges. I live at 22 Bach Boulevard in Howell. I'm here representing the fire commissioners.
I think you got to get sworn.
Oh,
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you provide the board this evening will be the truth?
yes,
You state and spell
yes.
State your name for the record, please.
My name is Jeff Hodges,
Raise that
H-O-D-G-E-S.
mic up because you're a little taller. There you go, that's
Sorry.
better, thank you. We have to get you on the record.
All right, Hodges. I live at 22 Bach Boulevard in Howell. I'm here representing the fire commissioners for the Township of Howell. That includes all 5 districts. My question, basically, as it stated in a remark from Bob Hotmeyer that you guys all received as well, how it said the fire township does not support the RSIS threshold. The proposed roadway widths and cul-de-sac radius are inadequate for the efficient use and placement of firefighting apparatus and equipment. This is correct. Hearing testimony before, they were talking about a 50-foot width right-of-way for that cul-de-sac. Is there any way to widen this street? The reason why I'm asking about this, because it is a cul-de-sac, one way in, one way out. It's already hard enough to get fire trucks down streets, let alone get it into a cul-de-sac. I've been a fireman in this town for over 10 years, and there's a lot of developments that it's very difficult to get in and out of. One of the reasons why I bring this up as well with the 50-foot radius, you're talking about no sidewalks. So it makes it actually fairly easy to widen that street compared to adding sidewalks. Now, with that street being wide enough, you could park on both sides of the street and bring the apparatuses in as necessary. I'm actually for or against the sidewalks. It doesn't matter in my opinion. I've seen a lot of developments within this town that do not have sidewalks. So if you didn't have the sidewalk, you widen the street, you still make it safe for children. I have a lot of children in this town as well. So
What-
I'm asking,
can I-
my
can I ask
question
you a
is about
question?
widening the street compared to adding sidewalks.
What house is the initial response to this development?
This is Adelphia, the District 2.
Okay.
So is there any way to widen that street compared to adding sidewalk?
I can answer that in that, from an engineering standpoint, if we exceed the residential site improvement standards, we have to go and request an exception from them, which the state has flatly said they will not grant. So we can widen it to the standards of the residential site improvement standards. Beyond that, our hands are tied with the residential site improvement standards.
All right.
Mr.
can
Hopkins,
I-
there is also, on the particular map itself, there is an offer or a proposal that there would be a path to the, at the end of the cul-de-sac to the detention basin, correct?
That's correct.
What's the width of that path? 10 feet?
I don't know.
It's too small. I know where it is, right there. That
Is-
right there. Okay.
So it's 10 feet. Is it possible that we would be able to widen that to allow for a truck, a fire truck or something to be able to at least pull into there to turn around if it could not otherwise turn around in the cul-de-sac?
I don't know that that would be possible.
So 10 foot is the.
That's all
is
the
the
right of way
maximum
we
width.
have there.
Yeah, it's probably not going to be possible.
The cul-de-sac is a 40-foot radius? 48? So you've got a 96, so you've got a 96 from curb to curb on the diameter for the truck to,
80.
I'm sorry,
96 to the right-of-way.
96 to right away. Street's 40.
Correct.
It's a pretty
So-
big area.
It's pretty big, but the trucks are also very big. They carry a lot of equipment. One of the other reasons why I bring this up was another question I was going to ask, which I know is going to be pretty much impossible, is the fact about fire hydrants. Another thing that was mentioned on here that there's no public water or fire hydrants available within this area. Looking at a map for hydrants and water lines within the area, which I did earlier today, it would be almost impossible to bring a water line down to this development. I understand that. They understand that as well. The problem that we don't like is with technology nowadays and how we're trying to improve everything, we're building 8 homes in an area that again, does not have hydrants. With that included, if there happens to be some sort of structure fire within that neighborhood, you will have to end up calling what they call a tanker task force in. Now, with the street being as wide as it is, you're bringing tankers down that street. Either that, or you're going to have to block off West Farms Road, and then the hose line, you have to put a pumper down on the end and run how much hose all the way up to the end of that street possibly. That's a problem with us because of the fact of how much hose we have to lay out, how much apparatus, or how many apparatuses we need down there, on top of apparatuses already being down on that street. So that's why I'm asking about a wider width on that street, for one. 2, is there going to be any sort of water source if there was some sort of fire, any sort of fire suppression? There was another development, or not development, but a building that was talking about putting tanks in the ground. We're not really for tanks in the ground, but anything is better than nothing. So I'm bringing these up to you so that you can think about these. You guys talked about what the police chief had mentioned, but nothing was really mentioned about fire suppression.
No, we thank you for
So
it. Thank you.
that and also sprinklers in the buildings, but we won't, that can be done with house water.
Counselor, if we act favorably tonight on this application, when you come back for final, I would like for you prior to meet with the chief of the Adelphia Fire Company to review the plan, because he's the guy that's going to be bringing directing the equipment and the firefighting. And I like to get his approval or his recommendations for what needs to be done to accommodate his firefighting for this development.
Certainly, the main issue, I'm sorry, I just don't want to.
No, yeah, sure, it's cut on.
We, taken into heart what this gentleman has just testified to, and what that request is, we certainly would do that. And ultimately, if we can comply with additional requests, that'll advance the safety and promote the safety and welfare of the residents that would be owning these homes. It certainly helps us. We just don't want to run afoul of the state, and then, I mean, we're caught in a catch-22 with respect to trying to.
I understand that.
I was told, first day in law school, you can't serve 2 masters, right? So one of the things we have is the RSIS standards, which is saying do this or else. And then obviously we have deep concerns here. I like the concerns of the fire department over bureaucrats in Trenton to determine what's up, because they're the ones that are on feet on the ground, boots on the ground, so to say. But yes, we will. A long answer to that is yes, we will deal with that.
Okay. That's something that the board will take into account.
And if they have to pull a tanker in, I mean, the chief may want to see a truck turning radius plan put together.
Turning radiuses would depend on who's driving.
Well, I'm assuming a tanker comes in like a tractor trailer.
It would. It would be actually very difficult to get a tanker down that road and get it back out. Because with the tanker task force, you're not talking 1 tanker. You're talking about 5, which would require numerous towns to be called in as well. So it's not just Howell Township that's coming. You're going to have Freehold Township coming. I think Millstone comes out as well, and there's another town around the area that comes. I think we have 3 tankers within township right now. So you're talking 6 coming at one time. And that depends also if they end up calling in Jackson, Ocean County, stuff like that. Depends how big it is. But my request is if the street could not be widened any farther, possibly restricting parking on one side of the street.
We have to do that.
Okay. That was something that I just wanted to talk about. I didn't know about that. Just because you have to think about how wide these trucks are. If you have a ladder truck down there as well, you have to remember they have to have,
You need 16 with the outriggers down, correct?
yeah, outriggers. That's what I was thinking of. So just putting that in your mind, that's all. So that's why I'm here. Now, as a concerned citizen of the town as well, now not the fire department portion of it, Because the proximity is so close to the reservoir, has anyone did an evaluation on the property about endangered or protected animals or plants?
Yeah, yes, as part of the approval process, we went to the Department of Environmental Protection. There are wetlands on the property. Part of their process, they do check their database, and if there's a flag on their database, they actually have an independent evaluation, and nothing came up.
I'm just curious, because don't get me wrong, I'm all for development and stuff like that. What I've heard by these testimonies prior to mine, I like that. I like hearing what they have to say. So, nothing against that, I just look into those just in case. That's all I have, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Anyone else from the audience would like to come up and ask questions of this witness? Seeing none, I'll close this portion. Do you have any other witnesses?
No, thank you very much. At this particular point, we submit, based on what's been placed before this board on the exhibits, and as well as the testimony in this meeting and the prior meeting, and we would respectfully request that the board grant the preliminary subdivision approval of the applicant. Thank you.
Does the board have any questions? Any discussion?
Is there any other outside agencies that will need to be reviewed before now and final? I'd like to try to understand that, and if we have any opinions, give them those opinions now.
Yes, if you go to Ms. Newman's letter, her November 14th letter on page number 5, item number 7, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 listed agencies that need to give their approvals.
Okay, it'd be my opinion that all the approvals are met before they come to this board. I'd like to see an application completed, not one of these approvals, and then it's approved upon contingent of getting these.
Well, again, Mr. Townhouse, that's the benefit of acting on a preliminary, not a preliminary and final. Ron frequently tells the board you can't issue technically a conditional final approval. So that's the benefit of, for lack of a better term, bifurcating an approval and doing a preliminary, so that when they come back, they're just addressing all their items
Okay.
to the satisfaction of the board.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yes,
On
Mr. Burke.
the map, they show a proposal of doing a 40-foot roadway. I say they do that with sidewalks.
If I could, the 40-foot is the right-of-way, and I think what was indicated, I requested that go beyond that to be a 50-foot right-of-way to include the easements that are to the outside of that. That's the right-of-way. The paved width of the road is 28 feet.
Okay.
And that is compliant with the RSIS.
It is compliant with the RSIS with on-street parking for only one side.
Right. And the applicant has agreed to restrict parking to one side.
That's correct, we're required.
And there are sidewalks on,
With sidewalks,
With side-
absolutely.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve preliminary for case number SD 2978.
Before we do that, we just had a citizen tell us just now that a fire truck can't get down the street.
Well,
And that is sticking with me.
Well, in all due respect, Mr. Russo, the problem is that the applicant is complying with the residential site improvement standards. And it's represented by his engineer, and I can attest for that because I've had other applications that I've seen in my other towns, that the DCA will not grant exceptions to make that street wider.
Well, I think
So-
before a motion is put on the floor, we have to, I think, discuss this a little bit further because this is a big deal.
Okay?
If you know,
You might guess.
Put a second motion, or do you, Mr. Schneider, want to pull his motion for a second? We will talk about it some more?
Well, we'll delay a second so that we can discuss this issue. And I'll ask Ms. Newman to weigh in on this.
Personally,
as
I
was
think
te-
everything has been said that has to be said.
I don't
for
think
them
so.
To come into final.
Well, Mr. Russo, part of the problem is that the state mandated the RSIS, the Residential Site Improvement Standards, to ensure that all residential development had the same type of guidelines. So I think as was testified to, we can't, I mean, they can make the stem of this a 30-foot road. That complies with RSIS if the board wanted to do that. But it's not, under the RSIS, they're not going to be able to make it more, they're not going to be able to widen it because they can't get the exception of that standard. And I would tell you that given the number of homes, even to go from 28 to 30, it's not warranted by traffic counts. The other thing is, I think they have mountable curb on this project. It's not concrete vertical curb.
That's correct.
So that does allow for some increased, I mean, a truck may be up on the lawn or part of that area, but it does allow for that to happen when you have mountable curb.
And again, I don't know if that's a balancing issue on whether the sidewalks are offered or not offered, but
No,
without the
the
sidewalks.
sidewalks are given, yeah.
And I think that they had previously agreed to meet with the chief to review what enhancements, if anything, they can make to this design prior to coming back for final, if the board acted favorably.
I mean, we've had this situation in other applications.
Well, I'm reading the most recent Howell Township Fire Bureau site review from the, I don't know what station this is from. It doesn't say. But they approved it. The Fire Bureau approved it, but without the sidewalks.
It was also approved with the original 8 lots all facing West Farm. So
Right, well, I'm
he's
not-
got to go through and do a whole nother evaluation and give us another report with his comments.
Well, no, I think that the most recent review letter that we received on, I think it was on July 12th, that was a site plan review of the current cul-de-sac, correct?
There's a new one dated September 18th for the last,
I have, my most recent is the July letter. I don't have a September letter.
his September 18th letter said they've reviewed the site plans as presented showing 8 lots for single-family dwellings. Their position statement is that they support the concept and use of the above-listed project. As to the construction design, they issue the following statement. The Howell Township Fire Service does not support the recess. Therefore, the proposed roadway widths and cul-de-sac radius are inadequate for the efficient use and placement of firefighting apparatus and equipment. But I can tell you that is on all their reports when the roadways meet recess and don't go to their standards. The other comment is there's no public water or fire hydrants available in the area.
That is Exhibit B28.
Yes.
And just like we did with, of the last meeting with the development down off Randolph Road, all right, I'm asking them to come back, when they come back for final, to have met with the chief of the initial arriving station. And if the chief has a problem, then that's something that we're going to have to look at when we go to final.
I'd like a letter from the chief before the meeting, having reviewed the plan as is with the sidewalks in the cul-de-sac.
Can we make, Steve, can we make that a condition of the resolution, please?
That the letter of the Adelphia Fire Company chief providing either approval or his recommendations regarding the revised cul-de-sac with sidewalks proposed.
Yes. And his ability to access and fight a fire and then have his equipment depart the site.
Yeah, have everything that resident put on the record, have it addressed, because there were a couple things.
Yeah, but remember, even the chief has to defer to the Howell Township chief, who has the final word.
I'm offering here that this is only a preliminary subdivision approval. Any of the conditions and concerns that were addressed all would have to be addressed.
I
at the
understand
time
that.
of
I
final.
think the board has,
We're trying to give you as many.
I think what the board has to
Can we hold-
understand,
Can we hold on a minute till he gets?
Can we hold up for a second, please?
okay. I think what the board has to understand is the position statement of the Fire Bureau has never changed. I don't think that that's going to change as a result of the application. So the board needs to understand that RSIS has, I don't know the right word to say it, but they have come up with these standards. They say that this standard complies. They say that a fire truck can get around with there. So, we can get the letter, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the chief's going to change his position.
Yeah, all I want is somebody to go over there, check this out, the chief, all right, or somebody, or a direct associate of the chief, to go there, do a study, give us a letter that says that everything that resident just said is addressed, and give his comments, because it's troubling. That's, your 10 years, a 10-year, sir, with the fire department? I know I can't talk to him out there. You're 10 years, sir? 10 years?
Also, I think putting in the letter that they offered where the cul-de-sac is, that 10-foot driveway to back a truck in to help it turn around
That would be a really tough movement.
would be helpful.
They can review that with the fire chief.
Yeah.
I have to tell you that I don't think a fire truck can access or back up through there.
A good driver could do it.
I mean, they are mountable curbs, so ultimately, again, this is just a preliminary. We would have to come back on all those issues.
Does that address your
It does,
concern?
but I'm not a voting member tonight anyway, so that's fine.
Not a
Just for the board.
Okay.
Mr. Schneider
I was a little deficient before you go there, Mr. Tannenhouse. I do have to indicate that the voting members eligible tonight are Mr. Schneider, Mr. Tannenhouse, myself, Mr. Boyle, and Mr. Kuzer. Correct?
Yes, they've certified.
Okay. So, we have Paul's motion.
Yep. And
I'll
that motion
second it.
includes all of the stipulations that they talked about? Okay.
I
I'll
need a
second.
Yes.
I
Mr.
think
Tannenhouse, second?
I think Mr. Boyle already did.
Oh, did he?
Yes.
Okay. Eileen, would you like to call the roll, please?
Sure. Mr. Boyle,
Yes.
Mr. Husser,
Yes.
Mr. Schneider,
Yes,
Mr. Tannenhouse.
Yes.
And Chairman Nash.
Yes,
Motion carries.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Hopefully, the next one's going to be a little easier. Next application
All's well that ends well.
is case
Have a good
number
night.
SP 1046, Bank of America. It's a minor site plan, application of Bank of America as applicant and 3 Wire LLC as owners, seeking minor site plan approval to replace an existing teller window with a drive-up ATM on premises known as Block 54.01, Lot 9, 4005 US Highway North.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Scott Collins from law firm Riker Danzig on behalf of the applicant, Bank of America. I hope this one's a little easier. As you noted, it's an application for minor site plan. Essentially, what the bank is proposing to do is swap out an existing, swap out an existing drive-up teller lane with a drive-up ATM. I only have one witness that I intend to call tonight. It's Anthony Albano from Stonefield Engineering, and if we could call him and get him sworn, I think he can explain the project a lot better than I can.
Mr. Albano, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you provide the board this evening will be the truth?
I do.
Can you please state your name, spell it if it's difficult, and provide us your business address?
Yep. Once again, my name is Anthony Albano. Albano is spelled A-L-B as in boy, A-N-O. I'm a project manager at Stonefield Engineering and Design, located at 92 Park Avenue in Rutherford, New Jersey.
Mr. Collins, could you hold on one second?
Certainly.
Steve? We have a question. Is there a conflict if you're a stockholder in the company?
Probably all are. With our
You know, if
401ks.
you're, if it's part of a mutual fund, I would say no. If you're a direct holder of Bank of America stock, and this application will benefit Bank of America financially, to err on the side of caution, I would say yes, you have conflict.
Are you reclusing yourself?
I have to, yeah.
Okay. So let the record show that Mr. Everett is reclusing himself, and I'll ask if you can step down and leave the room. Don't think that's going to be an easy way to get out of other applications.
papers, you can leave them and I'll dispose of them. Yeah, but for final, they'll have new plans. Thank you. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
All right, take care.
See you, David.
Okay. So
Thank you.
yes.
I'm going to ask to have Mr. Albano qualified as an expert witness in the field of professional engineering. So Anthony, if you could just give the board a brief summary of your education, licenses, and such.
Yes, absolutely. I have a degree in civil engineering from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey with over 10 years of experience. I worked on over 100 applications similar in scope at this point in my career until about the one in front of you this evening.
And your license in New Jersey, professional engineer's license, is active and current, correct?
That is correct.
And you have no pending charges in front of the PE board?
That is correct. No,
Okay.
no
We'll
charges.
accept him as a professional in the field of civil engineering.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Anthony, if you could just give the board a brief overview of the location of the site, existing conditions, and what it is that we're seeking to have approved here tonight.
Absolutely. So once again, this is the Bank of America located at 4005 Route 9 North. It is relatively close to the intersection of Route 9 with Aldrich Road. In respects to the Aldrich Plaza, if you're looking at that plaza, it's in the northeast corner of the property. So it is located within the HD1 Highway District Zone where financial institutions are a permitted use. The surrounded uses to that property are along the Route 9 corridor are commercial uses. Directly to the east of the site is a park and ride. And then further down Aldrich Road and across Aldrich Road are residential neighborhoods. So once again, the application in front of you this evening is to replace an existing drive-through teller window with a brand-new drive-up ATM. Now, if I turn to sheet C3 of the application in front of you, sorry, sheet 4.
If I could just interrupt you for a second, Anthony. The plans that you're presenting here tonight are identical to the plans that were submitted as part of the application and have already been marked as A1?
That is correct.
Thank you.
So as shown on our sheet C4, we will be taking out that existing teller window and replacing it with a drive-up ATM. The ATM itself will be fully enclosed within that existing ATM teller space. So what you'll see as you drive up to it will just be the ATM face. Now, as part of these improvements, we will be doing some minor site upgrades in front of that ATM. That includes some minor pavement rehabilitation as well as some minor curb work. And there will be a significant upgrade to the striping in the area to help delineate the existing drive-up lanes as well as the bypass lanes in the area. Additionally, because we are putting in an ATM, we are required to install additional lighting to meet state ATM lighting requirements. As part of those improvements, we will be installing 4 light poles that will have a total of 5 fixtures on them. We'll also be installing 3 wall-mounted lights and 4 canopy lights. So if you turn to sheet C5 of the set in front of you, is the overall lighting plan depicting these upgrades. Now, once again, the driving force behind this is to meet the state ATM lighting requirements, and those requirements and required lighting areas are shown on sheet C6. So, a quick summary of what is required for an ATM in the state of New Jersey is up to a 60-foot radius from the ATM, you need a minimum of 2-foot candles. That's provide a security lighting for an active user of that ATM to ensure that the area around them is well lit and you can see any activity that's going around you. In addition to that, there's within a 5-foot radius of the ATM, you will need 10-foot candles. Now, because we have to meet these ATM lighting standards put forth by the state, we are going to be requesting waivers, as stated within both the planner and engineer's letter, for excessive levels within this area. But because we are trying to meet state ATM lighting requirements, we feel that that is a waiver that can be granted with no harm, especially since its purpose is for security of the clientele using this ATM. So, once again, we have received both the engineer and the planner's letter reviewing this project. As previously stated, we will be requesting the waiver for intensity within the parking lot because of the higher levels that we are required. In addition, there's a comment from the engineer's letter about signage. There is an existing pylon sign as well as existing Bank of America signage on the building in front of the main entrance. With this ATM application, there will be a small ATM, small Bank of America and logo insignia on the ATM, approximately 4 square feet in area that we would request a waiver for as part of this application. As stated within the engineer's review letter, any previous approvals that have been applied to this site, we are not aware of any outstanding approvals or restrictions on this site, but we will comply with anything that it has been previously approved for this site. The existing, another comment was to describe the interaction of this ATM. Once again, this is an ATM, this is a existing teller window. It's not currently in use, but what we will be doing is replacing that window once again with the ATM. So all construction will be limited pretty much just to the face of that building. So during construction, we'll cone off the areas that we're improving, and it won't have a major impact on the site circulation of the site. Also, there was comments about the outside agency approval. Due to the minimal scope of this project, there's no change of use. It's going to continue to operate as a bank. There's not a great deal of disturbance because there's only 4 poles being installed. We will not be required to meet any application from those outside agencies, such as the county board or the soil conservation district that would have jurisdiction in this area. In referring to the most recent planner's review letter, once again, there's that request for the waivers for the lighting intensity. Once again, we will request that. There was a comment about the light pole heights. It was to our understanding that the light pole heights were allowed to go up to 30 feet, and that's why we're proposing 25. But if there is a maximum, because I know there is a wording of that it's up to the board's professionals, we would request a waiver for installing a 25-foot pole when a 24-foot pole has been recommended.
You're proposing a 25-foot pole?
That is correct. Another item was this banking industry standards today has changed to where you want to use electronic services. As you can see at this branch, the existing existing drive-up teller windows are no longer in use. More modern banks that are newly constructed are going almost solely to ATMs. The transaction times at ATM are significantly faster than teller windows. What we consistently see is a transaction time of 4 minutes at a teller window when the average transition time at an ATM is 2 minutes. And your same exact transactions that you could do at a teller window, you could do at the ATM. So that is leading to one of the driving forces through banks in general, as well as on this site. And once again, it does provide a service to the local community that's not currently there, with no change of use or major operation of the site because it is acting as a bank currently today. Once again, this is an existing bank. The existing infrastructure is there today. We're not proposing anything to change the use. The circulation on site will be the same. There's no proposed change to the existing drainage patterns on site. There's no change to the landscaping on site. We're trying to continue to operate this bank as a more modern institute that's commonly seen with newer construction today. And that's my direct testimony, and if the board has any comments, I'd be glad to answer them.
This is one ATM machine, right?
Yeah, one through the wall.
So if I understand these drawings correctly, there's actually two lanes. There's one lane that's adjacent to the building, and then there's a second lane, which is the abandoned teller window.
Correct. The outer one is where we'll be putting the ATM.
Right. Why not put the ATM on the inner, just out of curiosity?
It's more of an architectural item, but what I could testify to is this outside lane one has the room to put the ATM structure itself without infringing on the space interior to the bank. That same structure in that same interior location could infringe on the area of the existing teller space that happens inside the bank.
And I apologize, but the inner lane, the one that's not being impacted, is that a glass window right now?
Yeah,
or
it is
that-
currently a glass window that's not in operation. The bank does constantly review their transaction times and the needs of individual banks. So there could be a possibility in the future that they reopen it as a drive-up teller, but it is currently not operational today and signed for you to use the interior bank.
And many of the banks, when you have just strictly the ATM, the overhead light will be converted to say, rather than the red, green, it'll just have the ATM on it. Is the canopy signal indication going to be modified?
For this project specifically, it will not be. It won't be modified. It'll just be with the ATM lighting and the associated lighting. There won't be a specific ATM on sign that's sometimes put in operation.
And is this in addition to the two that are already there? There's two ATMs that are
Internal.
internal.
Yeah, they're walk-up ones where you have to leave out of your car.
Right.
Especially in a highway district such as this
Sure.
one, you don't want to get out of your car with the ability to use the drive-through and stay in your car to use your transaction. That's a service that is perceived to happen in a location such as this.
I wish the chief were here for this, but safety issues, I mean, are there camera requirements for drive-up ATMs?
Any state security requirements would be in effect. That's one of the driving forces behind the lighting, so we would be meeting any requirements that are required.
Brian, can you weigh in on the lighting?
Yes, I can.
Wait for that.
So, any reason why the lighting that you're proposing, well, let me ask you this question. There's two lighting plans, one that shows the lighting at grade, which is how our ordinance wants you to show the foot candle ratings. And then there's another plan, 36 inches above grade, and I'm assuming that is meeting the state's requirement.
That is correct.
But your lighting proposed is over four times the state's minimum requirement in an area of the state that doesn't have a lot of crime. Can you please, provide some testimony as to why you're four times higher than the state minimum?
Yeah, absolutely. There is, when we design our site, we do have, as shown on the New Jersey lighting requirements, we have a minimum of 2.3 within this radius. So our overall design has a minimum of 2.3. So there is an overlap between all our light fixtures that do increase certain areas, but to get the overall spread throughout this whole entire area, we have a minimum of 2.3, which meets that 2-foot candle requirement.
And I see that you've met your 2-foot candle minimum 60 feet from the ATM through the additional poles that you've put in. It's the overhead canopy lighting that is bumping you up to 44, which has me a little bit concerned because that is extremely bright for someone to go from 2-foot candles to 44. Do you happen to have an idea of what would be the IES recommendation of a max to min from going, as you're driving through the site, from 2-foot candles to 44?
Off the top of my head, I cannot tell you that information.
And you've also provided 50-plus foot candles, almost 60-foot candles. You're just under 60-foot candles in the area that's not going to be the ATM. Is there any testimony you can provide as to why that is so high?
So once again, especially within the front of the ATM where the face is, we are required to have 10-foot candles. And to get that 10-foot candles within that entire area, we do need an overlap that's going to raise the light levels considerably within that area in order for us to hit that. Now, underneath the canopy,
Now,
existing.
I'd like to stop you there for a second. So unfortunately, you have not provided us a plan that indicates what is the vertical face foot candles on the ATM. So unfortunately, I can't review that. All you've provided is the horizontal foot candles.
That's the requirement.
So I unfortunately don't have enough data in front of me tonight to be able to say that your 44-foot candles on the horizontal will meet your 10-foot candles on your face.
Well, the requirement is for a horizontal reading out to 10 feet from the face
Because
of the ATM.
it says minimum 10-foot candles at face of ATM, extending 5 feet outward in all directions.
Yes, that's to refer to 5 feet from the face of the ATM out in all directions, the area, the horizontal area that's required to have that 10-foot candles.
And you're saying 36 inches is the plane that it's measured on?
That's correct.
Is it customary for a bank to be 4 times the amount of, I guess I'm not a light expert, that's him, but I guess brightness you can say? Is that customary in banks?
It's not unusual through our experience, especially in the canopy areas, especially when you're doing a retrofit of an existing bank. It's hard to place the new light fixtures that would make the site compliant in the optimal condition. So
You're not doing anything out of the ordinary, right? I mean,
no, we're trying to strike a balance between what's required and what's existing on site.
Mr. Tannenhouse?
It's just my opinion that 40 to 60-foot candles is too bright for an outdoor environment. Unfortunately, I'm not in a position to say much more than that. Is there any other testimony, or can our own professionals weigh in on this, or how can we try to resolve this tonight?
Well, I mean, I will just say, and I don't want to get into personal experiences, but drive-up ATMs in this day and age are scary. And I would appreciate more lighting for just that, the safety aspect of it.
I think, and I'm not against the safety aspect of it. I think that makes a lot of sense. But 60-foot candles is very, very bright. We don't have 60-foot candles in this room, in my opinion.
We're not at a drive-up ATM either
What-
at
what-
12 o'clock at night.
What's a dealer, car dealer, general level of illumination? I'm sorry, but he's a
I don't-
a lighting expert.
I don't have that data on my head. But
Because I thought that was somewhere around 20 or 25.
Yeah. I was going to say 30, but
Ms. Newman, what does our ordinance say for a car dealership, the level of illumination?
We don't speak to the levels for a car dealership. I mean, we speak to general lighting levels and defer to IES. Sherry may be able to chime in. I mean, I think car dealers can go higher than 30-foot candles. And typically, because if it's being a canopy area, it kind of traps the light, which is why you're seeing higher levels directly underneath the canopy. It throws differently.
Yeah, but I can appreciate what Mr. Tannenhouse is saying. You're going from 2-foot candles to this blinding light of 44-foot candles. Your eye can't adjust to that. It's very uncomfortable.
especially if you're elderly. I think if you've got some older eyes, I think it's going to be very disorienting for that person coming up to their ATM.
So, Mr. Albano, what are the current light levels there? Do you have an analysis showing what the existing?
We did do initial site visits there. There are certain dark areas within the canopy structure today because it's not an operational ATM site within that area. But we have found within that general area 10-foot candles in 2 or 3 spots. But because not all the lights are on and operational, we're trying to hit a certain requirement, it is dark today.
I got a quick question. Mr. Albano, the parking lot is lit, correct?
Under the proposed condition, it will be for certain areas.
Is it lit currently now?
There are small lantern-style lights that aren't significant enough to impact the lighting study. They're
Okay.
about 1 or 2 foot candles within like 5 feet of that individual light.
Tom,
source.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but to come around that side of Bank of America,
Yeah.
it's dark back there.
It is.
It's completely dark back there. And you're driving up to the proposed ATM. Not to mention that you have the adjacent municipal lot that, although lit for parking, that's pretty dark as well.
It is.
So you're coming from darkness and then going to get money in a proposed 18.
Mr. Hester, what I am, what I am stating here as a board member is I have no objection to any of the light levels outside of the canopy area. I think that the light levels around the building and within that 60-foot required radius are done very well. It is that it is that spot just underneath the canopy when you start seeing 56 and 60, and you see 36 and then 44, just, around that ATM, I think it's going to be very uncomfortable, and I think you're going to not be happy with going to that area,
Mr. Albano,
especially with older eyes.
real quick, the spillage, can you provide some testimonies to the spillage of what Brian's talking about, that canopy area?
Yeah, once again, that goes to effect that there's an existing canopy today that's at 8 feet. Our readings have to also be taken at 3 feet, so you're only 5 feet from the light source. So that does lead to a higher reading right underneath the light. And once again, because we have to get a certain area, we need that spread of 10-foot candles at the edge of that limit. It will be brighter right underneath the light.
Yeah, but that 36-inch high is the height of the driver's eye,
Yeah, and-
okay? So you're experiencing that. If it was 5 feet up and you were saying it was right below the canopy, then I could appreciate. But you're driving right through that.
Mr. Chair, can I interrupt? I've reviewed other banks, with this one in particular, I remembered in North Brunswick, another big bank that also had this drive-up ATM. They have the same thing with a 3-foot, separate lighting, point by point, and their lighting is actually even higher. Some of their points are almost at 100-foot candles, and then beyond the immediate area, you're at back down to 6-foot candles. So it's just, it is typical.
Yeah, but so when you drive away from this very high intense lighting, all right?
Right, as you move away,
This is why in tunnels, we do the transition lighting, all right, is that gives your eye time to adjust. You're talking about going from a radically high light level to something that's not too far from dark, all right, within 50 feet.
Right, yeah, I mean, as you move away, this one goes from, 99 down to 53 to 11 to 8, and, and then you're back down to more normal parking lot lighting. I mean, I don't know if you ever drive through those, they are really bright. It's kind of like, almost like when you walk into the new Wawas, you have to go from the dark and then it's all of a sudden really bright. It is, that's how they typically look, those canopy ATMs.
I mean, can this be ameliorated by somehow changing the canopy lighting so that it's not so bright underneath the canopy, or?
Brian, what candle do you think it should be?
What's that?
What candle do you think, a 30?
I would have seen it, would have liked to have seen it more closer to the state requirements of 10 to 20. We're not in a high crime area here. You tend to provide extra lighting in very high crime areas, and that's not Howell.
If I was
I mean,
a bank, I would want that area a little more lit than just a normal parking lot.
agreed. And the normal parking lot's at 2. Well, actually, we like half a foot candle, I believe, is what our ordinance requires. But they're proposing the 2, which is a state requirement per the documentation, and they're about 2.7 in the parking lot, and they're 60 just in that canopy. I think it's a little bright, especially in the area that they have 60 in the teller area, which is not the ATM area. That should be closer to that standard of 10. Would be my recommendation.
I got to tell you, the more I look at this, and I do appreciate, Brian, I appreciate your expertise in this.
I'm of one opinion, so.
Yeah, I got to say, the benefit outweighs the burden here in terms of, I'm with Nick on this one. I think it's dark around that corner. I didn't even think of that until you brought it up, Nick. That is a dark corner over there. And, and you testified.
I'm only talking about these 2 fixtures and those 2 there. All this other stuff is good.
No, I know, but there's going to be spillage from the canopy. But I got to say, you testified that this was not out of the ordinary for your type of business, right? For these banks, this is pretty much standard, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so,
Well, I can appreciate what you're saying, Mr. Russo, but we have to walk carefully here because we're going to be setting a precedence. And if we grant it to this applicant, and no offense, all right, every other bank is going to come in and say, hey, I want this bright light bulb also.
yeah, for me, it's safety. You know, for me, it takes one incident where somebody gets followed and they don't see them coming, and we would look back and say, oh, why wasn't this well lit? Why didn't we?
But listen to the testimony. The testimony is the
5
state
times
requires
more.
10 to 20 foot
Yeah.
candles.
10.
I understand that, but the applicant just stated, this is on the record, that this is customary. This is not out of the ordinary. It is extra bright in banks for obvious reasons, because there's money, and how is it open 24 hours?
That's correct.
So it's open 24 hours.
So why doesn't the state mandate a higher level?
I don't know, but I think that there's something very telling when a bank and when a gas station has extra bright lights for obvious reasons.
Tell you, we don't have 50-foot candles at Quick Check when we approved that application. And those pumps are
I don't know the exact type of light that is at the PNC where I live. I live right across the PNC Bank. And when you go under there, under the canopy, that's bright. And I'm like, thank God. You know, I don't want to, you can see everything. And also, it deters people from hanging out around there. So there's a deterrence also. I not only do you see danger coming, but it deters people from hanging around. I know we're very lucky to live in Howell Township, and it's a low-crime area. I don't want to invite crime.
Let's open it up to the public.
What's that?
If we open it up to the public,
Well,
I made my statements.
you want to weigh in on this?
Oh, I like it bright, especially for a bank.
Huh?
I
want it
don't
bright
see
on-
any
I want it
adverse,
bright
I don't
underneath the
see what
canopy.
the adverse conditions are, the detriment to it.
I'm not saying it has to be a 40, maybe a 30, or
Well, that's what
a 25.
I think that's what Brian and I are saying, is that we're not adverse to the bright lighting, we're just asking to dial it down a little.
Yeah. I can see dialing it down some, but not to a 10. I think that's not bright enough.
If I could just circle back and sort of review some of the testimony here. This is a design exception, and I think what Mr. Albano testified to were a couple of things that are significant that may have slid under the radar. It's a very difficult engineering puzzle to light when you're retrofitting a facility as opposed to a new build, or even like a Quick Check or a Wawa that you see now. Because of the existing conditions and what's around it and everything. So I think that's a more difficult problem, and I think what your engineering consultant or planning consultant noted was, and Anthony and I know this because we travel all over the state doing this 3 nights a week, it feels like, is that the immediate area of the ATM in a drive-up situation under a canopy is always, and Anthony, if you could just speak to this, it's always the most difficult part for the reasons that were discussed. The canopy traps the light. You have what, on a lighting plan looks like an explosion of light, because you need to hit those requirements. And Anthony, correct me if I'm wrong, the 5 feet, in this case, when we talk about where the teller lane is, or the teller window, that's because of the circumference of where the ATM faces. That's why that area is lit. It seems common sense that you might not need that there, but it's what's required.
Again, the only thing that we're not in any way, shape, or form discussing the circumference. It's just the area directly under the canopy. Let me ask you a question, Anthony, and then I'll be quiet after this. Is your design to try to create an even light spread under that canopy, or to just create a bright spot of light?
We're trying to balance both. Now,
So let me ask you this question. Could you achieve the same thing by providing more light fixtures and lowering light foot candles overall, but making it even spread instead of having 60-foot candles closer to the fixture and then 10 in the middle?
That was what I was just going to suggest. in the main behind, in that inside one, we can add an extra fixture and possibly look at the ability to lower the LED count in that area. Right in front of the ATM, it will be a little bit more difficult the way the structure is itself there. But within this drive-through canopy, we could look at adding another fixture, lowering the LED count for all three, and hopefully obtain the same light level as that.
So you go from 18 to 14 to 39. Which one of those numbers would you be most comfortable with having in that canopy? The-
Underneath,
Yeah, the 18,
without being in the software to look at the lighting.
or just in general, would you rather, because 10 is your minimum.
Yep.
We're all in agreement that 10 is too low. Is 18, 19 okay?
I don't.
So if you could redesign that lighting so that it would be 19 averaged under there and get rid of those hot spots, would that be acceptable
Yeah,
to you?
we would look into lowering the average throughout by adding another fixture and dropping the LED count. If the board would act favorably on the application, that is something in this first drive lane that we could look into doing.
In my opinion, that would be acceptable.
Okay. Let me, if there's no other questions from the board, let me just, Counselor, if you have no other testimony from this witness, let me just open it to the public for a second.
Certainly.
Okay. All right, I'll open this section of the session to the public. If you'd like to come up and ask the applicant's engineer any questions, please approach the podium. Okay. Seeing none, I'll close the public session. No other witnesses, correct?
No.
Okay. Would you like to do a summation?
I don't think that we need to. I think we understand what the issues are.
All right. So let me just poll the board here, all right? We have two options here, all right? The applicant is here for minor site plan approval, which means, Steve, we're giving them de facto preliminary and final tonight?
Just minors.
Technically, under Mr. Lynn, minor site plan is minor site plan. There's no preliminary and final. That really only applies to major applications.
And
So,
Mr. Chairman, just if I could, Sherry
Yes.
was able to clarify that Quick Check has a max of 30 feet at the ground under the canopy. So again, that's ground level, not 36 inches higher.
I think, Mr. Collins, not speaking for the board, but I'm going to speak for the board, we would like to see it come back with a redesign that dials it down a little bit, all right? I think your engineer has indicated that he's able to do that. Are we comfortable in putting this on our professionals, or would we like to see this come back? Nick?
I'm fine with the applicant as is.
I don't see any reason to come back.
I would be comfortable with them stipulating that they even out the lighting underneath the canopy to get to that 18 across that canopy. Now, again, we're just talking about the canopy that does not have the ATM. This is the teller canopy, not the ATM canopy. Just to get rid of that hot spot that they have in the front.
Tom?
And
I have to ask you, are you going to be able to get that to 8? I don't think you're going to be able to get that to 18.
To an 18 average, we'll definitely be able to smooth it out and drop the overall levels, but once again, without looking into the application. But we'd be willing to work with the board professionals to have
Laura, are you comfortable if we approve this to take on the responsibility to make it work? With
I
what
don't
the-
know what I'm making work, Mr. Chairman. I think that's part of the problem. If, Mr. Tennant, I have to know what the board's looking to see there. Yes, they can balance it out and even it out, but it still may be a light level that wasn't adequate to the board. I think I need some sense. I don't think they can get to 18 underneath there, as Mr. Tennant has just requested. So to be fair to the applicant, rather than have them go home with that, I'm going to have to send them back to the board if they don't meet that. So the board has to, I'm more than happy to work out the lighting plan, but I need to know what I'm working out.
And just to follow up to what Mr. Albano said, I mean, it's very difficult to commit to a lighting level here on the fly. It is something that's done with computer software. I would be very reluctant to commit to a specific number. If we were to work with the board's consultants in a way that, we would think would work, that would be wonderful.
Well, I hear you, and I hear what my engineer is saying, all right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the board to give her some guidance as to what we're looking for, all
Okay.
right?
Well-
And I'm essentially going to ask Mr.
I think I'm the
Tannenhouse-
only one that's here
Well,
stating that 56 is too high.
No, I'm in agreement with you.
I respectfully disagree. I think that as is, this application's perfectly fine. It's nice and bright underneath the ATM. It deters crime, deters shady activity. I'm okay with it.
Mr. Boyle,
I'd like to see it bright.
I guess we're outweighed.
Okay.
Okay. With that being said, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to pass this.
I'll second.
I'll second it.
Mr. Druso did.
Mr. Russo,
Sorry. you-
Double
well,
second.
he can get-
Roll call.
Roll call.
Mr. Boyle?
Yes.
Mr. Husser?
Yes.
Mr. Russo?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes,
Mr. Tannenhouse?
No.
And Chairman Nash.
Against my better judgment, yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you all very much. We appreciate how seriously you take your job.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay, since there's no other applications, master plan, we're still waiting for the council authorization to move forward. Eileen, in all probability, we're going to do what we did last month, wind up canceling this month's master plan.
Want me to post a sign right away?
I think what we'll wait is for the, what did we wait the last time, a couple of days before?
Well, yeah, it's next Thursday, so I can post it Monday or Tuesday.
Okay, why don't we post it on Monday,
Okay.
okay? Any reason to go into executive session? No? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion
Make a
adjourned.
motion to adjourn.
All in
Aye.
favor? All right,
Aye.
meeting is adjourned.